निंगते सोपमा स्मृता
नेङ्गते सोपमा स्मृता
योगिनो यत चित्तस्य
योगिनो यत चित्तस्य
युञ्जतो योगमात्मनः
युञ्जतो योगमात्मनः. Anyone else? Okay, let's recite the synonyms. Yatha,
यथा
as. Deepah,
दीपः
a lamp.
लैम्प
Nivatastha,
निवातस्थ
in a place without wind.
in a place without wind.
Na,
न
does not.
does not.
Ingate,
इंगते
waver.
waver.
Sa,
ता
this.
this.
Upama,
उपमा
comparison.
comparison.
Smrita,
स्मृता
is considered.
is considered.
Yogina,
योगिना
of the yogi.
of the yogi.
Yat chittasya,
Yat chitta
whose mind is controlled.
whose mind is
controlled.
Yunjata,
yunjata.
constantly engaged.
Constantly engaged.
Yogam,
Yogam.
in meditation.
in meditation.
Atmana,
Atmana
on transcendence.
on
On
transcendence.
transcendence.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. Purport. A truly Krishna conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshutarine. I read the translation one more time. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So in this verse actually, we see Prabhupada is basically giving a bhakti twist to this verse, which is right. And we can talk about it. There is an interesting conversation that happened between Sat Swarup Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. I'll mention that a little later. But if you see here, what has happened is, so this verse, this chapter actually started with, what is that verse that Krishna speaks about mind being the enemy, right? Bandhuratma atmanastasya yenatmevatmana jita anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. So basically Krishna started talking about how mind can be the friend of the self, or it can be the enemy of the self. So the idea was that the mind is our greatest enemy and we can make it our friend. But the first step to, so how can we make the mind as a friend is basically we need to control the mind. Krishna talks about conquering the mind. So conquering will be, far away, but the first step is at least control it. Control in the sense that we should not indulge in sense gratificatory activities. The mind will push us that, okay, do this, do that, the same broken record of sense gratification will play constantly with them by the mind. But we have to push the mind back. So once we are able to at least do that, the desires may come, but we should not act on that desire. So from that point on, the mind will start becoming our friend. So that is the basic actually. So initially, Krishna had talked about that, first we have to follow Yam, Niyam, Asana, and Pranayam. Those are the four. So basically, we had discussed that Krishna had introduced two terms. One was the Araruksha and the second was Yoga Rudha. So Araruksha is the person who is climbing the ladders of yoga, is the sadhaka stage. So until the person is in Araruksha stage, he should not take sannyas. But once the person is beyond that Araruksha stage, when he is going towards Yoga Rudha is the perfection, then actually he can start, basically he should go to a secluded place, and from there he should practice yoga. So if you remember the verses that came were Shusha Udeshe Pratisthapi Sthiramasana. So basically go to a secluded place and then you should, lay a asana, which is made of kusha grass, then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth, and then the asana should not be too high or too low. It should be well established, and then sit on that asana. So that's how the things have progressed from there. So basically, the idea is that so we have the 8 limbs of the Ashtanga Yoga. We have Yama, Niyama, Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam. These are 4. These are the basics. And then the higher stages are Pratyahar. Pratyahar means, so Yama means don't do this. So we have our own 4 relative principles. And we have the Niyamas. Niyamas are basically things that are to be done. So we have our own niyamas, like reading the scriptures, chanting chanting the names, worshipping the deities, association of the devotees, eating only prasadam. So we have our own niyamas. Similarly, so we had discussed in last Monday what are the 5 yamas and what are the 5 niyamas and what are the benefits. So in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, there are benefits mentioned about, what would be the benefit of following these yama and niyamas. So these are the basics, the foundations of the Ashtanga Yoga process. Then there is asanas. So asanas are basically meant to control the vayu, the prana vayu, and basically that will bring a certain level of purification. And then the 4th is the pranayam. So pranayam are the breathing exercises, breathing techniques. So this is a well-known fact that breathing is connected with the mind. When we feel agitated, even when even the doctors would tell us that if you feel very angry or you're very agitated, then take deep breaths. So the idea is when we are too much agitated, then taking deep breaths will help us control the mind, So these things are used to control the mind. And then we have, of course, I'm just talking at a very basic level. This is much more nuanced, but I'm just giving a little overview of what we have discussed so far. So, and then we have pratyahar. Pratyahar is basically shutting out the external senses, so that is a very difficult stage. And that's where Krishna is talking about, in the previous verses, if you remember in the 13th and 14th verses, Krishna had said that, the yogi should, keep his body erect, and the neck and the head should be in a straight line. And in the yogi, the eyes should be half open, half closed. And then the yogi should, stare. That's the word Prabhupada uses. Actually, I was so, I noticed it. Prabhupada uses the word stare. So at the tip of the nose, basically the concentration should be brought at the tip of the nose with the half open eyes. And then that's how, so we'll discuss about what is the Sampragyat Samadhi. Prabhupada also writes in the purport of the next verse 20 to 23. So pratyahar is basically when we shut out the external senses and we try to take the consciousness inwards, for actually doing the dhyana. So from there, the advanced stages of the yoga starts, and those are the stages which are to be done in a secluded place at a Shucho Deshe Pratisthapya. Basically go to a secluded place, which is a sacred place, not just any secluded place. It should be clean. Shucho means clean. So, and then the further 3 stages are dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So, dharana and dhyana, or dhyan, dharana, and samadhi. I'm getting a little confused with the what comes first. Dharana comes or dhyan comes. Whatever comes first doesn't matter. But the idea is, so if we say that dharana comes first, so dharana is that at least to a certain extent, the yogi is able to concentrate the time for a little amount of time. When he advances further, then he can, dhyana is basically he can control the mind for a longer amount of time. And samadhi means, he's constantly able to control the mind, focus the mind, not control the mind on a particular point. So actually, again, there are various levels again of, so there is a sampragyat, asampragyat, savichara, nirvichar samadhi. All these are samadhis, and I believe Prabhupada talks about it, so I'm not covering it here. In the next verse, Prabhupada is going to cover it. So Krishna is saying in the 19th verse that if a yogi is able to do like this, then he is using the analogy of a lamp. Just as a lamp, it does not waver in a windless place. The flame is constant. It's constantly burning. So as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So later Krishna is going to talk about that how the yogi has to focus on Krishna, on the Paramatma. But right now the idea is that first focus on the self. So first we understand, okay, there is a self. So he'll talk about that how the person will be able to see the self. How do we see the self? So that's something which we cannot understand unless we actually experience. It is something to be experienced, and that's how Krishna will put it. That this is an experience for the intelligence. It's very difficult to describe. So remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So here Krishna is describing that stage, and then Krishna in the next verses he will talk about how this focus, advances further. What is the result of such a steady meditation? Of course, it has to be practiced and it takes a lot of time. And then there are further levels to it also. So before we move on to the next verses, which are the key verses, and they have special significance in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition also. Many acharyas have given excellent commentaries about the next 4 verses actually, 20 to 23. These verses come together. There are only few places where we have 4 verses that come to. I believe there is one in the 13th chapter where we have verses 8 to 11 that come together, where the qualities of a Gyan Yogi is described. And there are 4 verses are grouped together here in the 6th chapter. There might be few other places, but I'm only aware about these 2 places where 4 verses are together grouped, together. And then Prabhupada gives a very elaborate purport for those 4 verses. So, but before we move forward, are there any questions or comments or corrections about what I said about 6.19?
Prabhuji, I was just reading, it is Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi.
Oh, thank you, Mataji. Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi. Yeah, thank you. That's the sequence. I always get confused. Dhyan, Dharana and Samadhi, or Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi. So it's Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi. Okay, I'll try to remember it next time. Okay, any other questions, comments, corrections? All right, let's move on to the next verse. Share my screen. We just recite these verses once, and then we'll move on to the purport. So these are verses 20 to 23. So you can repeat after me. Yatro parmate chittam.
Yatro parmate chittam.
Niruddham yoga sevaya.
Niruddham yoga sevaya.
Yatra chaivatmanatmanam.
Yatra chaivatmanatmanam.
Pashyanatmani tushyati.
Pashyanatmani tushyati.
Sukham atyantikam yattad.
Sukham atyantikam yattad.
Buddhigrahyam atandriyam.
Buddhigrahyam atandriyam.
Vetti yatra na chaivayam.
Vetti yatra na chaivayam.
Sitaschalati tatvatah.
Sitaschalati tatvatah.
Yam labdva cha param labham.
Yam labdva cha param labham.
Manyate nadhikam tatah.
Manyate nadhikam tatah.
Yasmin sthito na dukkhena.
Yasmin sthito na dukkhena.
Gurunapi vichalyate.
Gurunapi vichalyate.
Tam vidya dukkha samyoga.
Tam vidya dukkha samyoga.
Viyogam yoga sangitam.
Viyogam yoga sangitam.
Synonyms. Yatra.
Yatra.
In that state of affairs where.
In that state of affairs where.
Uparamate.
Uparmate.
Sees because one feels transcendental happiness.
Sees one because one feels transcendental happiness.
Chittam.
Chittam.
Mental activities.
Mental activities.
Niruddham.
Niruddham.
Being restrained from matter.
Being restrained from matter.
Yoga sevaya.
Yoga sevaya.
By performance of yoga.
By performance of yoga.
Yatra.
Yatra.
In which.
In which.
Cha.
Cha.
Also.
Also.
Eva.
Eva.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Atmana.
Atmanaha.
By the pure mind.
By the pure mind.
Atmanam.
Atmanam.
The self.
The self.
Pashyan.
Pashyan.
Realizing the position of.
realizing the position of
Atmani,
Atmani,
in the self.
in the self.
Tushyati,
Tushyati,
one becomes satisfied.
one becomes satisfied.
Sukham,
Sukham,
happiness.
happiness.
Atyantikam,
Atyantikam,
supreme.
supreme.
Yat,
Yat,
which.
which.
Tat,
Tat,
that.
that.
Buddhi,
Buddhi,
by intelligence.
by intelligence.
Grayam,
Rahyam,
accessible.
accessible.
Atindriyam,
Atindriyam,
transcendental.
transcendental.
Vetti,
Vetti,
one knows.
one knows.
Yatra,
Yatra,
wherein.
wherein.
Na,
Na,
never.
never.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also.
Eva,
Eva,
certainly.
certainly.
Ayam,
I am,
he.
he.
Sthitah,
Sthitaha,
situated.
situated.
Chalati,
Chalati,
moves.
moves.
Tattvataha,
Tatvataha,
from the truth.
from the truth.
Yam,
Yam,
that which.
that which.
Labdhva,
Labdhva,
by attainment.
by attainment.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also.
Aparam,
Aparam,
any other.
any other.
Labham,
Labham,
gain.
gain.
Manyate,
Manyate,
considers.
considers.
Na,
Na,
never.
never.
Adhikam,
Adhikam,
more.
more.
Tatah,
Tataha,
than that.
than that.
Yasmin,
Yasmin,
in which.
in which.
Sthita,
Sita,
being situated.
being situated.
Na,
Na,
never.
never.
Dukkhena,
Dukkhena,
by miseries.
by miseries.
Gurunapi,
Gurunapi,
even though very difficult.
even though very difficult.
Vichalyate,
Vichalyate,
becomes shaken.
becomes shaken.
Tam,
Tam,
that.
that.
Vidyat,
Vidyat,
you must know.
you must know.
Dukkha samyoga,
Dukkha samyoga,
of the miseries of material contact.
of the miseries of material contact.
Viyogam,
Viyogam,
extermination.
extermination.
Yoga sangitam,
Yoga sangitam,
called trance in yoga.
called trance in yoga.
Wow, that was long. Thank you for bearing with me. I almost went into samadhi with that. Okay. Translation. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super self. This is very important. We'll discuss this. Identifying the self with the super self. There is an intermediate state where the yogi can identify the super self as the self. And, if that happens, there could be some, not so, the results may not be good. So we'll talk about it. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. So there are other systems also. We have the Raj Yoga, we have the Patanjali Yoga, we have the, the Kriya Yoga. So these are all the different kinds of yoga, and Patanjali is by far the most commonly accepted. And Patanjali is or of the rishis, and most of the times when we see the commentaries of the acharyas, they are commenting on the Patanjali yoga system. Basically, the idea is the same, to control the mind, but there are different techniques that are there. And the Raj Yoga may basically talk about some different techniques. Patanjali may talk about some different techniques, but it is Patanjali is much more established and well accepted throughout. And in fact, there are many research institutes also which are focusing on the Patanjali yoga, not so much on the other yogas. I know there's one in Pune, actually, not Pune exactly, but it's between Pune and Mumbai. There is Lonavala and Khandala. So there is a yoga society over there, and they do a lot of research in a sense that they try to go to places where the authentic Patanjali yoga system is being followed, and they try to get the original manuscripts, and they try to establish the original Patanjali yoga system that has been there, in ancient India. Because now, as we know, the yoga has been corrupted so much. We have, so I think I mentioned this once. We were distributing books at the Apple Harvest Festival in Glastonbury, and we were walking around with the books, the Bhagavad Gita and other books. So I met a couple, and we started talking to them, and then showed them the Bhagavad Gita, and then I found out that they are from Pakistan, and they're Muslims. And then they were very, nice couple. They were both students, actually. They were studying here, for which I think it was UConn, University of Connecticut, but they had come to attend this Apple Harvest Festival in Glastonbury. This was at least 3 to 4 years back. And then they started talking about that, how, do you really think that if you go to a yoga studio and give $100, then you can attain God? That's how they mentioned to me. And then I said, yes, exactly. That's what Srila Prabhupada is also saying. If you remember in the 13th and 14th verses, Srila Prabhupada is very heavy. He says that you can't have sex in the morning and evening, and then in between you do some yoga, and then you think that you can transcend the material. That's not going to work. So Prabhupada is at times very heavy. So complete abstinence, complete brahmacharya has to be followed. Prabhupada also says that in the Bhakti school or in the Vaishnava school, something like that, Prabhupada says that Grahastha brahmachari is accepted. Grahastha brahmachari, he says, because there in the Grahastha life also there are a lot of rules and regulations that are to be followed. But he says that in the Jnana Yoga school and in Dhyana Yoga school, complete abstinence is required. In fact, there are books written by some yogis where I have at least read one book where he mentions that, the author mentions that how he had gone to a yoga school back in India, somewhere in Bengal. And he was one of the favorite disciples of his guru, but there was one other disciple of his guru who was very favorite to him. And they used to live in a very secluded ashram, and they were practicing yoga. They were, trying to progress in the system of this yoga. They were not doing Patanjali yoga, but Kriya yoga. So he mentions that once this other disciple was a favorite of his guru. He had taken permission from his guru to visit his parents. So he went there, and his guru was very advanced. So he actually contacted a girl when he was gone from the ashram. And when he returned, the guru can immediately understand that, this person is no longer pure. And then this guru just drove him out of the ashram. He said, you cannot do it now. You just forget about it. You cannot be admitted to this school again. So that is how strict they are. So let me go further here. Yoga, so we were talking about the Patanjali system. So some authorized commentators try to identify the individual soul. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super soul. And the monists think this to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist, but in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprashavaha Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtha Va Chitti Shaktir Iti. The Chitti Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. So Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, this is what he is referring to. So, but going back to this point here, that, you know, there are certain, so many acharyas have talked about this, that, you know, there are cases where when the, in these verses here, 20 to 23, Krishna is talking more about realizing the self first. But later in the verse 27, I believe Krishna will talk about that how ultimately the Dhyan Yogi has to progress further and he has to focus on the super soul. Krishna actually will say on me. So now there is a possibility that so the acharyas explained that there are two possibilities for the yogi. One is that, you know, he can think the super soul to be the soul, and then he may think that, okay, this is me, and then if that happens, so he may merge into Brahman, but again we know that Brahman liberation is not permanent. So that is one possibility. And the second possibility is, so when we say one of the niyamas there, Ishwar Pranidhan, you know, surrender to Ishwara. So that surrender can only happen when the yogi can see the soul and the super soul as separate entities. You know, the Pranidhan will happen only when you see there are two distinct entities, and then one entity will surrender to Pranidhan to the other entity. So this Ishwar Pranidhan is a very important limb. You know, that is what takes the person into Samadhi actually. Otherwise, it's very difficult. So if that actually happens, when the yogi is able to see the two entities distinctly, and then if he surrenders to the super soul, then the acharyas explain that the highest he can go is, he can actually go to the one of the Vaikuntha planets, and there he can attain a Shantarati, or he can attain a you know, like a Dasarati in the sense that the becoming like a tree or something, you know, in that sense. This Chitti Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Cheto Darpana Marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. The theory of Nirvana also preliminary corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Sarupena Vyavasthitihi. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situated in this verse. So we'll talk about this. What is this, you know, Nirvana thing that is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada? And we will go to the actual verses and we'll try to deconstruct those verses. But moving further on the purport, after Nirvana or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vyavasthiti, this is the real life of the living entity. Maya or illusion is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtha Va Chitti Shaktir Iti. This Chitti Shakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12 as Anandamayo Bhasyat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada is hinting that how this can also be realized by Bhakti Yoga. You don't have to necessarily perform Dhyan Yoga to basically realize the self. In the yoga system as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called Sampragyat Samadhi and Asampragyat Samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researches, he is said to have achieved Sampragyat Samadhi. In the Asampragyat Samadhi, there is no longer any connection with the mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in the transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. So before we move forward, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Sampragyat and Asampragyat Samadhi. So different people explain this differently. And we also have Savikalp, Nirvikalp Samadhi. So the Sampragyat Samadhi is basically situating the consciousness on a point, on an external object. Like in the beginning, Krishna says that one has to stare at the tip of the nose. Basically, the consciousness has to be focused on the tip of the nose. Consciousness that is radiated through the eyes. So there are different senses, and the consciousness is going throughout, through the various senses. So we have the touch sensation, that is also kind of conscious. When we hear, that is also, we hear because we are conscious. Similarly, so the idea is that, the entire consciousness is to be focused on the tip of the nose. So in our tradition, we have the sonic meditation. So the ideal way of chanting is that we should be completely focused on the chanting of the holy names. The sound vibration, as we say. Once a person asked Srila Prabhupada that, Srila Prabhupada, when I chant, my minds trouble me so much. Prabhupada said, where is the mind? Why does the mind come in the picture at all? You just have to chant and you have to hear. Where is the mind in the picture? So that is a very advanced stage of what Prabhupada is on that stage. At least for me, there is only mind in the picture, and mind creates so much trouble. So the Sampragyat is basically when we are focusing on a particular object. Like for example, we have in the example in Mahabharata, where Dronacharya asks Arjuna, what do you see on the tree? So Arjuna says, I only see the eye of the bird. So his entire consciousness was focused on the eye of the bird. So that is Sampragyat. Asampragyat is that, you don't need an external object. So at times there is a Savikalp Samadhi. So the next level is Savikalp. Savikalp means there is a thought. You are focusing your consciousness on a thought, or mind. Basically, when we say consciousness, the consciousness is routed through the mind. The external senses have to be shut out, and only the mind is active. The mind has to be focused on a thought, and then the next level is Nirvikalp, where basically you don't even need a thought, and the consciousness is totally situated on the self. So that is considered to be one of the highest stages on the self, and then from there it moves further to the super self. Super self is the super soul, of course, not the super self. So okay, today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, perfections in the process of yoga, are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons, therefore, indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. So this is actually very important. So what has happened in today's society is that they basically only focus on two limbs of the Ashtanga Yoga. They don't follow yamas, they don't follow niyamas. All they follow is, and that is also not perfect, they follow the asanas and the, the breathing exercises, pranayam. So they are focusing only on two limbs, the asanas and the pranayam. So that's it actually. And the idea is, so asanas and pranayam, the utility of those two in the original school of yoga is basically the yogi is living in a very secluded place. There is, he's completely secluded. There is no access to anything at all. So basically he should be healthy. The first is, and second is he should be able to control the senses, at least the vegas, as we call the vega, in the sense when I'm using that word, I'm referring to hunger, thirst, those kind of vegas. So basically what these two do is they keep the body healthy. So they give a like a basic healthy health platform. So that today's yoga society, what they do is they only focus on the byproducts of yoga. That means the byproducts are, it basically keeps the body healthy, and when the body is healthy, it also makes the body a little more attractive. So they only focus on that, and if you only focus on that, you will not be able to get anything advanced. So Krishna also says in the 4th chapter, ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sateva bhajamyaham mama vartamanu vartante manushya parth sarvasha. He says actually, as you approach me, as you surrender to me, accordingly I reciprocate. So if a person is only doing yoga for health benefits, Krishna will give him the health benefits. He will make him look attractive and he will make him healthy, but that's about it, and those are like just material things. And then there are certain yogis who do it only for siddhis. They don't have no interest in Paramatma, they have no interest in Krishna, they have no interest in self-realization. All they need is siddhis, and then they have to just just boast around, I have this siddhi, I can get this from there, I can fly in the air, I can walk on the water, so many different siddhis are there, and then just get some appreciation and some followers. And what about, what after that, we'll die. So this material world is perishable. So what's the use of all that? So that's what Prabhupada is hinting at. So they cannot attain the stage of perfection as is stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastics, feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. So that is not the essence of yoga. The essence of yoga is to attain Krishna or Paramatma. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practice Hatha Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. So Hatha Yoga, there are practical limitations. When we meet so many people, when we go for book distribution, when we at times we talk about Bhagavad Gita, and then we tell this is the book of yoga, and then they say, oh, I can't do yoga because my body doesn't support, I'm so fat, and I have so many things. And then we tell them, you don't have to do any asanas actually. And then we tell them what is yoga, and then there are different kinds of yogas, and then there is Bhakti Yoga, there is Karma Yoga, there is Jnana Yoga, and there is Ashtanga Yoga, which is popular in the West. So that's how we sometimes, but there are limitations, not everyone, even I cannot do it. I'm relatively, my body is healthy, but I can't do, once my friend took me to that Bikram Yoga, and there the idea is a little peculiar. They actually make the temperature of the room so hot, it is almost 95 or 100 degree Fahrenheit. And then in that, then they have different yoga poses and all that, and I was sweating so much and I was hardly able to breathe. I could not even stay there for 15 minutes. I had to come out of it. It is just not possible. Of course, there are people who are doing it, but it's very difficult. Then in the Dhyan Yoga, there is mental gymnastic, and plus the Jnana Yoga, there is mental gymnastic that is involved. You have to read so many scriptures, so many Upanishads, which doesn't even make any sense. Plus the life has to be so austere, extremely austere. A glimpse of Jnana Yoga is given by Krishna in the Uddhav Gita section, where it describes how a Jnana Yogi, the ideal Jnana Yogi should live. That he has to be completely away from material things, and even eating is prohibited at times. You have to only eat what is available on its own, just dry leaves which fall on their own. You are not even allowed to pluck the fruit from the trees. Sarva bhuta hite rataha, have to be, you have to be a friend of all living entities. That's how Krishna puts it. So, but then Krishna says, but there is no such problem in Prabhupada says, but there is no such problem in executing karma or bhakti yoga. So bhakti yoga is joyfully performed. Krishna also says that in the 9th chapter, 2nd verse. Raja Vidya Raja Gohyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Avagavam Dharmyam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. On the contrast, when Krishna talks about the Jnana Yoga path in the 12th chapter, he says that there is klesho adhiktaras tesham avyakta asakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkham. So klesha and dukkha is there on this path, but on the path of bhakti yoga, it is joyfully performed. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure bhakti yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous toward incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative, but is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. This is a very advanced stage of Bhakti Yoga, which Prabhupada is talking about. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Agama Paino Nitya Stam Satikshasva Bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in the yoga practice. So Prabhupada actually explains this verse. So he talks about both the paths. He talks about the Dhyan Yoga path and also the Gyan Yoga path. But let's focus on this verse again and try to understand. We don't have much time. I would have spent some more time on the purport, but I also want to talk about this, the verses themselves. So yatra uparamate chittam. So yatra means there, in that state. Uparamate, the chittam. Now there are two kinds of chittas that are talked about. So this is explained by Baldev Vidyabhushan. So there is chit and there is chitta. So Prabhupada also talk about chitti shakti and chitta. So they are two different things. So chitta is the original spiritual consciousness of the soul, that the original spiritual consciousness. And chitta is the consciousness that is radiated through the subtle body, through the mind, and through the gross body. So we have the spiritual body, which is the soul. Then we have a subtle body, and then we have the gross body. So there are three different bodies that we have. The original body is the soul, actually the spiritual body. Then we have, it's not a body, but it's basically the spiritual essence that is there. Then we have the subtle body, which includes the mind, body, and mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then we have the gross body. So actually the consciousness that is radiated through the subtle body, through the gross body, that is called as chitta. So chitta, so for our practical purposes, what we are aware is only about chitta. We can never be aware about chitti. I mean, of course, not in the current state. So chitta, we can understand that it is the conditioned consciousness, for us. So, but what Krishna is saying is, yatra uparamate chittam, niruddham yoga sevaya. So that niruddham means still, stops. So that external consciousness that becomes still by the practice of yoga sevaya. Yoga sevaya is by the practice of yoga. Yatra chaivatma atmanam pashyan atmani tushyati. And in that state, the person is able to see the self, observe, I don't know what to say, not see, but he is able to perceive the self. Perceive in the sense he is able to experience the self, the real self. We can look in the mirror and we can see, oh, I have this nose, I have this, these two eyes, I have the ears. But actually that is not the self, that is just our gross body. The self is deep inside. Now, how to perceive the self? This is an experience, it's very difficult to describe, but Krishna is trying to describe that experience for us so that we can understand what happens in that state. Pashyan means he sees. Now here sees, so he's able to see, it seems. So of course, when the consciousness is there, the consciousness means, and it is also explained that even the soul has transcendental senses. So Prabhupada also uses that word transcendental senses. He's able to experience through the transcendental senses. So Atmane Tushyati. So, and then in that state, he is satisfied with that experience. And then Krishna talks about further. Sukham Atyantikam Yattat Buddhi Grahayam Atindriyam. So unlimited happiness he experiences. And how that is experienced, it is an experience for Buddhi Grahayam. Buddhi is the intelligence. Grahayam is, it is experienced through the Buddhi. Atindriyam means it is beyond the senses, beyond the gross senses. So this is a transcendental experience. And Vetti yatrana chaivayam stitash chalati tatpataha. And attaining that state, the person never deviates from the truth. Never deviates from the truth. So I was talking in the previous verse that there is a conversation that happened between Srila Prabhupada and Satswarup Maharaj. So Satswarup Maharaj asked Srila Prabhupada, is it possible to have such a position where we never deviate? At times even when we become devotees and even when we have been there for so long, at times there are some, some occasional slips and misses and fall downs may happen. It's possible for anyone, and so he asked that question. Prabhupada said, surely it is possible. We can attain such a position, and Prabhupada's life is a living example of such a position, how to attain that. And further, so what happens in there? So Krishna describes this state further. So what happens when we are never deviated from that truth? Yam labdva cha param labham manyate nadikam tataha. So basically Krishna says that after attaining that state, the person or the yogi thinks that there is nothing better to achieve. When we live in this material world, we are always hankering. Even if we have the best of the things, even you have the best of the iPhones, best of the smartwatches, but yet we are, hankering for more, because we are never satisfied. Because what happens is, nothing material can give us any satisfaction. It cannot give us any lasting satisfaction. We might be a little happy for some time, but after that, what, we just become callous to that. Okay, I have this, but what next? I should get something more. So we are always hankering in the material life. But here Krishna is saying this happiness is so profound. It is, it is such an happiness that after attaining that state, the person thinks that there is nothing more to be achieved. This is the biggest achievement I can have. In the material world, we can say that, okay, I want to be the richest person in the Glastonbury town. I can say that I want to be the richest person in the state of Connecticut, in the whole USA, in the whole world, in the history of the world. But again, then I will become a history, so I can keep hankering like that, but it's not going to give me anything lasting. But in this state, there is nothing more to be achieved. We have achieved everything that I have to achieve. And then there is another point that Krishna adds there. He says, Yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. After attaining that, even if the biggest misery comes, the person does not deviate. He does not waver. He just remains in that state. So this is the definition of ultimate happiness or ultimate achievement. No material achievement, no material happiness can give us this state. It cannot take us to that state. So this is what happens in the state of samadhi. That's how Krishna puts it. Of course, there is further to this, which Krishna will talk about in the 27th verse. I was thinking what further could be there, but there is, it seems, further. And then Krishna puts further, he says, Tam vidya dukkha samyoga viyogam yoga sangitam. He says that, so viyoga means, yoga means to connect, viyoga means to disconnect. So Krishna is saying that, because this happens because the yogi, he disconnects from all the sources of misery, dukkha samyoga viyoga. And it happens through yoga sangitam, through the practice of yoga. So that's how Krishna describes this ultimate state. Now, I just want to mention one more point before I know we don't have much time. I want to give some time for questions, answers, and discussions. But there is a special significance of these verses. Even many Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas have also commented on this. But people who are doing Bhakti Shastri, they might have read in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he talks about that, even the devotees, the Mahabhagavat, they are also in that state. They are actually relishing transcendental happiness. So there he talks about 3 kinds of Mahabhagavats. So there are 3. So he says that the first level, the highest level of Mahabhagavats are which are gunatit, and they are Swarupa Siddha. So basically they are beyond the 3 modes of material nature, and they are Swarupa Siddha, means they have realized their position in the spiritual world, their position in relationship with Krishna. So for example, we know that there are certain acharyas who are manjaris in the spiritual world. So that is the first highest level of Mahabhagavats. And the second level of Mahabhagavats, so within the Mahabhagavats also there are categories, is they may not be Swarupa Siddha yet, but they are Gunati. They are beyond the material modes. They are callous to, they are materially inert, but they may not have realized their spiritual position in the spiritual world. And the third level is they are not Swarupa Siddha. They are not Gunati yet, but they are fixed in devotional service. So the first level, it is explained that they are already in the spiritual world, but they are just waiting for their body to fall. They also realize that, okay, what is their relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world. So they're just waiting for this material body to fall. And while they're waiting, they're also performing their services to Krishna in the spiritual world, and they're also doing their duties in the material world. The second level is, their one leg is in the material world and one leg is in the spiritual world. in a sense that, they are going to go back to the spiritual world, but right now they are in the material. They have not realized their sarupa, but they have transcended the modes. And the third is, both their legs are in the material world, but their eyes are fixed on the spiritual world. So that's how Rupa Goswami explains this. So with that, I just want to take a quick break here and see if there are any questions or comments. If not, then I can talk a little more about this. Any questions, comments, corrections about what I said?
Just wondering which one I am.
Yeah, you are the first one.
Eyes and the legs are in the material world.
you are the first level.
No, never.
Oh, you just have to sponsor 5 Bhagavatam sets and you can become.
That's how you give blessings.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or corrections? There's a lot to cover in this verse, but we only have so much time.
Explaining those 3 things, how can you be in the material world, and can you explain those 3 a little bit more as to what it means?
Yeah, so what it means is, at least the first level, so we see that sometimes they are like Jiva Goswami and other acharyas, they are writing about the nature of the spiritual world, the activities that Krishna is doing in the spiritual world, as if they are seeing what is happening in the spiritual world. At times we see that they don't even quote from any shastras, they are quoting from their own experience. It seems that this is what Krishna is doing.
Right.
So it is explained that this is because they are actually they are with Krishna in the spiritual world, but at the same time they are here in this material world. So they have realized their sarupa, they are doing their services already. So they are in the samadhi, their mind is fixed in Krishna, but yet because their body is still in the material world, they are just, they're also sharing what they are experiencing with others and giving them a, glimpse of how life is in the spiritual world. So that is the highest level. Now, the third level, which I talked about, I can talk a little bit more about that. So I mentioned that the third level is that they are not gunatit, they are not Swarup Siddha. So why are they not gunatit? Gunatit in the sense beyond the material modes, because there are 2 kinds of desires. There are the cultivated desires and there are some residual desires. Residual in the sense because of the previous samskaras, they may still have certain residual desires, which may still be there, but that's not stopping them from, their spiritual progress. So we understand that there are samskaras are basically those things, those impressions that carry, because they are so strong, they have been there from previous lives, and they become so strong on the mind because the subtle body remains the same. Even when the soul changes the bodies, the gross bodies, the subtle body always remains the same. So that means the mind, intelligence, and the false ego are the same. So at times there are certain samskaras which are there from the previous births who are so strong that they remain on the mind. Sometimes they are fresh, but sometimes they are not so fresh, right? Because of them, there might be certain material contaminations that might be there. Yet, because they are so fixed in Krishna, they are so fixed in their bhakti, and they make sure that even though those impressions are there on the mind, they don't fall down, at least in this, they're always fixed. So that is the third level. So where their eyes are fixed on the spiritual world, yet they are not Swarup Siddha yet, but they know that they are going to transcend. So that is the third level. Now, the second level is, they are Gunatit. They are beyond the modes. There are no residual desires. There are no cultivated desires also. And yet they may not have realized so Swarupa Siddhi is not essential to go back to the spiritual world. And this has been asked to Srila Prabhupada multiple times, and Srila Prabhupada has always said that no, you don't have to artificially just make up something that, oh, this is my original Swarupa, and then just whatever Krishna gives us, we have to surrender to Krishna. So whatever way Krishna wants us to serve him in the spiritual world, we have to serve like that. So that is the second state.
But all of these people are at a higher level though, right?
Yeah, right. That's true.
Yeah.
They are all Mahabhagavats.
But why are in the third stage, why is their eyes in the spiritual world, but they're not completely progressed yet?
No, they have progressed, but it's just that there are certain, so there is vritti, vasana, and sanskar, Mataji. There are three things. Vritti is certain inclinations. You know, like for example, at the young age, there might be some lusty desires which all everyone might have at a young age. You know, but the person, if he focuses too much on it, and Krishna also says that, you know, by contemplation on the sense objects, lust arises.
Right.
So that vritti, that inclination becomes vasana. You know, and then when the vasana becomes, when it advances further, it becomes samskar. It becomes a permanent impression. So samskar is also known as not samskar but scars. Scars in the English, they are like scars on our consciousness. They just stays with us, you know, because we have indulged in them so much. We have done them over and over and over again, that those impressions are just stuck to the mind, you know, and they have been there for since time immemorial, since so many lifetimes. So yet the key is, you know, this person may have certain samskaras, but he doesn't fall down. He makes sure that at least at a gross level. So when we take these vows, so the idea of that, you know, I will not indulge in these 4 activities. The idea is that there might be some certain you know, triggers might come for us, that okay, something that might trigger us because we have done these things in the past. There could be some material triggers that could be there, but we take a vow that at least at a gross level, I'm not going to fall for it. I'll just try to stay firm, you know, to my commitment. And so basically, when we say no to these material desires, we are saying yes to Krishna. You know, so that is how we have to understand that. So the third level, they are fixed in that way, you know. So they may be, so they are materially inert in a sense that there could be material desires, but they don't act on those material desires. Yet they are spiritually very much aware. So now we have examples, not exactly of this category. Now we have Haridas Thakur, which of course we know that he is the highest. You know, so when we say the devotees are also materially inert, yet they are spiritually conscious. So when Haridas Thakur, when this prostitute approached Haridas Thakur, Haridas Thakur, you know, he was materially inert. He had no material desires to enjoy with that person, but yet he was spiritually alert. He saw that as an opportunity to deliver a fallen soul, and then he delivered that prostitute actually. So there are various levels of Mahabhagavats. So now which person is at what level, we may not be able to understand, but at least when acharyas tell us that, okay, these are the 3 levels, and this, so at least we can understand, and then we can aspire to be at least at one of that level. Aspire, not artificially think that we are already at that level. So okay, I think we can end here then. Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnavendra ki jai. Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Ganpati Govind Prabhu ji ki jai.